beyond. Broadcast through the Wolf Spirit Media Network. Please join us in the chat room at wolfspiritmedia.net. Be prepared to leave your belief systems behind as we go beyond teachers, beyond gurus, beyond duality, ever beyond. Tune in with TalkStream Live, search for Ever Beyond. Also, you can call to listen on 712-432-9588. Selected archives are also available on my YouTube channel, Studio 9 Jam. You're listening to Wolf Spirit Radio. Oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's first live show. Thank you for enjoying the fabulous replays we've had. And I'm very honored and very pleased to have my guest on tonight. He needs virtually no introduction, so he's not going to get one. No. So my guest tonight is Thomas Sheridan, a favorite of Wolf Spirit Radio for many years. We've been listening to his shows, and he's been on as guest, and we've shot the breeze? You shoot the breeze? The breeze has been shot many times. It's lying in the corner, kind of bleeding. And we've got fig rolls ready, and I've got soy wax candles just to keep my tea warm. That's all they're good for. And without any further ado, good evening, Thomas. How are you?
I'm great, JP. A bit tired from a long day at work, but I'm delighted to be here.
Excellent. So, yeah, well, loads of great stuff to talk about. Where would you like to begin? I'm sure you've been sort of considering a few things you want to talk about today.
I don't know. Well, thanks for giving me a show here once a month. So I'm glad we finally worked that out. We've been talking about that for a while. So that's great.
I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to happen beginning June. And it's going to be the first Sunday of the month, which is a nice auspicious thing. And Becky's over there. She's thumbing up and very, very happy and pleased, smiling from ear to ear. And
yeah, she was the clandestine headhunter.
That's right. So watch out, people. You might be called by a secret agent. Our secret detective. So go ahead.
Yeah, I like the Sunday once a month thing. It reminds me, do you remember the old Patrick Moore TV show, The Sky at Night?
Oh yes. When
I was a little kid, I used to get real excited when what was it? I think it was the first Tuesday or the third Tuesday every month on the BBC. And when that theme song played, I think it was Host the Planets or something, I used to get real excited. So I kind of like those kind of ritualistic shows rather than modern day programming, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes, being on every week after week, people get used to it and they think, I don't know, I might as well watch it or I'll pick it up in the archives. But we're going to be talking tonight and, you will be talking, I'm sure, in your own show about ritual and ceremonies and, regularities and rhythms for my belief, and also under the great topic of magic. So one of the things about it is, I've always believed that there's a magic in doing something on a regular basis.
Oh yeah.
I used to have a jam session and, I had a studio and every Friday night I would open my doors and I had no expectations. I said, whoever might turn up. And even if one person or 10 people or 20 people would turn up, there would always be some kind of beautiful music that was created out of that uniqueness of that moment, but also the fact that it's on a regular basis. So how about starting there? Ritual and rhythm.
Well, that's beautiful. You think of like a drummer, okay, and the sound of drums. If you could just have random banging, it's just banging. But if you have you have a repetitive rhythm. Now, the reason I think that's so, it's similar to where our eyesight likes certain shapes and designs, that because our heart has a regular beat, our nervous system has a regular cycle, just like electrical cycle, and we're in time with the seasons, the 4 seasons of the year, the rotation of the planet around the sun's orbit around the galaxy, and so on, that timing allows us to force ourselves into this reality, ritual and timing and ceremony, into this reality in such a way that rather than it being imposed upon us, we have a proactive engagement with it. So, for instance, you're completely feral and you have no regularity. Well, you're regulated by the seasons. If you're a woman, you're regulated by the menstrual cycle, the moon, and the tides, and so on. Otherwise, you're basically at the mercy of these cosmic forces. When you impose reality and ritual and ceremony, particularly in the context of a regular cycle, what you're doing then is you're announcing to the universe that I am here, I am present, and you're noticed. And that's why we're drawn to beats, we're drawn to rhythms, whether they're in Africa, whether ancient Europe, anywhere. And Native Americans were attracted to these things because they ground us within this 5-sense reality in a very positive way, in the sense that we can transcend the 5-sense reality. It's almost like, I don't know, robbing a bank to get rich. It's that kind of thing. Now, you look at like shamanic drumming. Shamanic drumming is almost rhythmic. Sometimes the beats change up and down in tempo, but the ultimate objective of that beat is to transform you or transcend you or transmute you out of this 5-sense reality into another reality. And that's because the shaman is giving you power through the beat, is helping you, is assisting you in this transformation process. That's what ritual does. Ritual is almost like your way of saying to the universe, I accept that you exist. I respect your own rhythmic cycles, but here's some of mine, and let's see how we can play with that. And that's really what ritual is about.
Fabulous. Ritual and rhythm. So, doing things on a regular basis, there's, as I said, has a magic to it. So, and placing yourself in a cycle as well.
Yeah.
For instance, when there's a whole law about when you cut your toenails or when you cut your hair, if you cut them on the waxing moon, your hair will grow more. If you cut it on the waning moon, your hair grows less. And the same with plants as well. So it's like to me, it's like a launch pad. If your launch pad is facing upwards, you're going to go up. If your launch pad is facing downwards, you're going to hit the ground quicker. So starting on the 1st of the month is a lovely auspicious. So, having said all that, wow. I had a skim through your book earlier. The house hasn't blown up or fallen down. Nothing's broken. No poltergeist activity. Yes.
That's because you skimmed through it.
So the first heading that I came to, that caught my eye is your world. Oh, sorry. I have to. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Please excuse me. Your new book. It's called Sorcery: The Invocation of Strangeness. And this is it's a good size, fits in your pocket, and quite readable text, because my eyes are getting a bit dim. But the first topic that caught my eye is your world today is a product of past sorcery.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah, absolutely. You are here, I am here, everyone we know is here because of, in ancient times, in far-off times, in Paleolithic times, one of our ancient ancestors discovered that the universe was hackable. There was many ways of doing this that they discovered it, some accidental, some specifically on purpose. But when I say the universe is hackable, well, there would have been certain obvious ways where they've done it. They accidentally stumbled upon entheogenic plants and ate them and had, psychedelic experiences. That's one. But to me, they're kind of crude, spiritual or shamanic experiences. They're like they're not, you take a plant and you get expanded vision for a certain amount of time, but it's really, you're at the mercy of the experience. You're not in control. Magic is your specific hacking into the the reality, and your own five senses doing that, particularly your nervous system. The nervous system is key to all this. So let me give you an example. Right, okay. If human beings had never discovered fire, you and I wouldn't be talking here right now. It's as simple as that. If some man in Paleolithic or earlier times hadn't rubbed two sticks together and discovered fire from the friction of rubbing these two sticks together at speed, you would not be talking to me right now. Now, they would have, in their vernacular, in their language, they would have not been able to say, well, it's friction caused by the molecules on both surfaces rubbing against each other, and the speed of it, charges the molecules and it releases the friction and combustion starts and so on. So they would have invented a language of mythology and a language of allegory, a magical language to describe it. So the two sticks rubbing together, the fire in the middle is a god or a goddess that I'm releasing from the wood. I'm a magic man. Now, why is this important? Well, because I can take this spirit of the goddess that I've created by rubbing two sticks together, maybe a man and a woman stick, and mating them. I can transfer it to a piece of dried moss and then hold it, blow on it with the breath of life from inside myself, place it on some more moss, then some kindling, and eventually have an enormous bonfire that, if I'm proactive about it, can burn down an entire forest in order that we can grow plants or bring in, before agriculture, bring in animals that we can hunt. Now, this is a magical experience. So if the goddess is the fire, the god is the fire, it's transformed into this idea. And this is everything through history. The first dams that were ever built to actually cycle water, the first pottery that was made, the first houses that were built were always built in circles inside once they left the cave. Once humanity left the womb of the cave and entered into the forest or the field, they built circular houses. They built themselves a new kind of womb. They were rebirthing themselves inside a magic circle, the demarcation line between the exterior walls of the house and the interior of the building was an actual magic circle. Outside, the predators existed, the dangers existed, the snakes and so on. The weather inside was security. The first magic circle was that. And building from that out, everything was a magical process for on and on and on to right where we are today. We are here not because of science, we are here because of magic. Science was just a technical language to describe sorcery. That's all that was.
Absolutely. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other night, and we were talking about what we call science these days. Again, it seems to be dividing into people who believe in science and, the whole thing. But actually, science is a language that is very useful to use when you're trying to define things that don't appear to you. So we can talk about ether, we can talk about gas, we can talk about air pressures and things like that can't be seen, but can be experienced. Like that. It affects the weather. So for me, science is a way of helping to describe those things that can't be seen and things that can be seen and things that can be measured, and essentially that. But before that, it was just the church had the kind of, everything that was invisible was the domain of the church. And so that's how science has really liberated us. What do you think?
Absolutely. Science is basically a technical metaphor. That's really when you think about it. I'm a big fan of science. I love electronics. I know you do too. We're both kind of geeks that came out of that world. Analog electronics, by the way. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's really what it is. You can call it everything you want. I mean, I even mentioned in the book that we have these terms du jour, quantum, matrix, dark matter, dark energy. Well, these are just words to describe the unknown, psi. These are just words to describe the unmeasurable. And, they still exist. Just because you cannot put a label on them and quantify them doesn't mean they don't exist. Quantify many, many things in this body that we as humans experience. What we can do is observe them. Now, science is very good at mechanical processes in terms of, creating new ways of processing,
Okay, well, just
Can you patch in the landline?
Yeah, we're on the landline now, and
Okay.
So welcome back, Thomas. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
What happened there is what happens a lot when you probably find that there's all weird noises all over the thing. It's par for the course for me these days. I'm sorry about that.
It's all right. I'm very, very used to this. It's okay. So here we go. Yeah. So, if, as long as you're comfortable, close to your fire and close to, we were talking about, science and how it allows us to describe those invisible things that only the church had the. Yeah. So can you remember where you kind of left off?
Yeah, well, what I said was that basically science is fantastic at understanding a process and then harnessing the process in order to do things. So, for instance, like taking electrons and turning them into electronic circuit, generating electricity from water, sun, and so on. What it doesn't understand, it invokes the classics, Richard Dawkins' statement of, we're working on it. And that's okay. I have no problem with that. But the problem is that science then says, I'm talking about scientism in general, then says, well, we know everything. You don't have to go looking anywhere else. You don't have to go seeking answers anywhere else. We're finding them for you. And I find this very similar to how the Vatican operated in the past with things like sacred mysteries.
Exactly. It was the invisible forces were the domain of the church, and we spoke in, they spoke in Latin. It was deliberately designed to confuse. So, for me, I'm a science for the people, spirituality for the people. It's what you, later referred in the book as folk magic. And it's like the church has been trying to eliminate the personal magic of the human being, hasn't it?
Well, this is the main point I'm trying to put across in this book, and I hope people get from it. I mean, I've been involved in magic since I was 11. I know it sounds weird, but I was. I picked up David Conway's book on a magical primer when I was 11. At Easton's bookstore in Dublin, and I was practicing magic from that point on, and discovered at a very early age it worked, and it frightened me. And at first, it worked too well, actually. And I put it away for a while, came back to it when I thought immediately I'd done something evil or wicked or something. I'd messed with, like, nothing dangerous happened, but definitely, we definitely opened doors. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Reality was immediately malleable and hackable to me at a very early age. Now, this is the point I want to make to people in this book and with this work I'm doing on the YouTube video series of magic, is that you do not have to get involved in heavy ceremonial magic in order to hack the operating system of the universe, which is ultimately what we're talking about here. In the same way, you don't have to anymore convey the emotion in a piece of music, or say a 4-hour Wagnerian opera performed with an entire cast and crew on a giant stage with lights and everything. You can do that in a 3-minute song now. The world has changed and magical forces are compressed. One of the reasons they're compressed is because the abundance of energy now is incredible. There's remarkable amounts of energy available to us, so we don't have to work as hard in the ceremonial context in order to generate it like we did. Now, the reason why ceremonial magic really took off is because the elites needed it. The elites, you know, the wealthy aristocrats, as every Dennis Wheatley novel has ever told us, needed to perform these mass rituals inside their stately homes, when down the road was an old lady with a cauldron, or a piece of hair, or anything, a piece of chalk on a board, or anything, who was able to do what they wished they could do. And that's because folk magic is ultimately where it all begins and ends. It is a personal, bespoke engagement with this process. And this is why having worked through the whole thing, I was looked at the early stuff, the Crowley stuff. I even went through the whole Lovecraftian Necronomicon kind of grimoires back in the 90s. I went through it all. The chaos magic, of course, was most liberating of all. I looked at the Kabbalah. I looked at everything, the ceremonial stuff, Golden Dawn, you name it. And at the end, I came to the conclusion that you don't need any of this stuff. All you need is a powerful imagination, a force of will, and a belief in yourself and what you're capable of in terms of creation. And that's all you need. I'm not dismissing or disparaging all these ceremonial magic systems. They all have their purpose in place at a certain time, just like opera did, just like anything did, but it always comes back to the source. It always comes back to the source. You have, a blues guitarist in Mississippi in the 1920s can generate as much power and force with a 4-minute song as an entire orchestra create, the Magic Flute by, say, Mozart, which itself is a magical opera, freemasonic opera. It can be done by anyone. It's not an enormous thing. It doesn't require you to meditate in an ashram in India for 20 years. It doesn't require you to take copious amounts of entheogens and ayahuasca and so on. It is there. It's just like that famous line by Franz Kafka. All you have to do for the universe to unfold at your feet is simply remain silent and observe. Magic, I've discovered after a lifetime of looking at this, is a science and an art of observation. Observation about yourself in terms of targeting your will towards what your desires are. And this is the great beauty of it. And this is what they've attacked the witches of the past, the shamans, the druids, the cunning men and cunning folk of old England in the Cromwellian times and up to the Victorian era, is because they are absolutely terrified of the ordinary person's ability to hack reality. They tell them it's not possible or it's evil. This is a huge problem with the alt scene, because the alternative media scene is basically a byproduct of Bible Belt Christianity of 1970s America that came through the whole system and ended up where it is today by 9/11. Christianity still runs through it like an infection. And then people think that anything to do with magic or sorcery, all-seeing eyes, or all this stuff is automatically evil. That's part of the deception and the psyop also. They do not want ordinary people knowing their own power. Within you is the forces of the universe. You can have and change anything you want, within the limitations of your own existence. So, for instance, if you're a poor person, you can actually involve yourself in magical processes to maybe improve your life up to a middle-class level. You're not going to be the Queen of England. You're not going to be Donald Trump. You might be, it could happen, but the reality is you aim with a modest focus in terms of what you do. Now, the best thing for that would be art, to compare it to. Suppose you're a painter. It's great if you get in the local gallery. It's fantastic if you become a famous, a legend. But ultimately, what you're aiming for initially in terms of a modest trajectory is attainable. The same as if you're a musician. Like you were saying about your rituals at the beginning of the show, your musical rituals. That is enough. Yeah, it's nice to be playing in a big stadium like a Bono or someone like that, or Coldplay in front of 60,000 people if you want that. But that's not necessarily a measure of success in terms of what you want to achieve as a musician. And the same thing is with magic. that you must. It's the same idea. You aim locally what you can achieve within your own world in order to better your experience in this five-sense reality. And for that, all you need to do is to understand, observe, and go with certain elements of your own consciousness in order to navigate yourself between what you are now and what your objective is in the future. It's really that simple.
Simply aligning yourself and aligning your mind on that line. It doesn't matter how the universe is going to get you there, but the universe will respond by bringing you and it together.
Absolutely. Of course, I mean, how many people have you, like this show, what we're doing tonight is an element of magic. I mean, we've known each other a while. We both respect each other's work. I consider you a friend, and so and Becky too. I mean, that's what we're like. But we would have not have gotten to this point if we weren't at some point in our past lives said, I don't want to be part of the previous life I was in. I want to be part of a new life. You know what I'm saying? That
Yes.
then softened up the subatomic fabric in front of you and allows people with similar objectives to fall into your reality. It's almost like you take one step forward with a pure heart and a desire that's direct and honest, and the universe will take 5 steps towards you as a reward. It's the same thing in reverse when it's sort of like a black magic thing. Now, people think that black magic is sacrificing babies. It's not. Black magic is when you're not honest with yourself in terms of your consciousness trajectory. So when you're doing it for pathological, selfish, or infantile reasons, it will backfire on you to the same effect. The universe loves nothing more than an honest person. Now, what I mean by an honest person is someone who doesn't have bullshit in them. Now, we all have a degree of bullshit in us, but it does not like airs and graces. That was one of the things I've discovered very early on, that in order to soften the subatomic fabric of the universe in front of you, it does not like respectable people who hide their faults, who hide their inhibitions, who hide their true feelings even if they're good feelings, behind conformity or respectability. These are the types that had to perform, create, and do ceremonial magic inside their stately homes because they were so respectable and genteel. Where the folk magic of the ordinary peasant or the ordinary person, who's direct and straightforward, has no airs and graces, who is very honest and what they would call crude. I often find that rude. I often find that interesting that they call megalithic sites and stone circles rude stone circles or rude monuments. They don't have to because they're more honest with the universe and they get what they want easier because they're not full of the same barriers of neuroses and self-doubt brought about by social conformity. They are what they are. And you'll find that all the time. This is one of the things, in magic and sorcery, a way of hacking the universe. The easiest way of all is to, first of all, be yourself.
I love that. It's the, I just got, I just got distracted by what somebody said, what Vanessa said in the chat room, which we'll talk about in a second. But about, and all right, maybe I'll just go in with this. And she says, the problem is those who use black magic seem to have a lot of time before consequences happen. And of course it started thinking, well, it's all about the manipulation of time, isn't it? And I know you touched on it in your book.
Yeah, did that person just say that black magic takes a long time?
The consequences of black magic,
No, actually, yeah, that's true. But the actual black magic itself is instant.
Yes.
That's one of the things. Black magic is like a hit of drugs. It's like a hit of heroin or going to a prostitute. It's an immediate fix where, white magic would be like trying to improve yourself and falling in love with someone, that kind of thing, and having a proper relationship. That would be like white magic. Black magic is the instant selfish gratification. Yes, it does take a long time to come back, but when it comes back by Jesus, it comes back like a roller coaster. It absolutely is true. Now, we may look at these elites who practice their kind of like left-hand path, pathological sorcery, whatever. the kind of people who took care of Jimmy Savile and all this. And you say to yourself, well, how come, the royals are not getting punished? Well, they are getting punished. I'll tell you why they're getting punished. Because of the bullshit they have to do to stay in power. Would you want, honestly, JP, would you want to be showing up at Armistice Day, opening race, show jumping arenas, this kind of nonsense, these what they call functions of royalty? All this nonsense is what they do to keep themselves from deflecting reality towards them. That's what they do, and they never get away with it. We know for a fact that Prince Philip will never get away from what he's done. I mean, even though they sealed his files on the Porfumo case for 50 years until after he's dead, those files are still going to come out. But even while he's alive, there's millions of people who are saying he's a dodgy bastard, he was involved in possibly the murder of Diana and so on. They don't get away with it. What they do is they have eternal and enormous damage control, and they only get away with it because they have the money, and they have the power, and they have the ability, and they have to work 24/7 to keep the monkey off their back. And that's so. Although it seems like it takes a long time to get to them, it always does. You look at all the royal bloodlines that have been wiped off the face of the earth, and it will happen this bunch. This Saxe to Coburg. It will happen them eventually too.
Indeed. So let's, there's a question in the chat room from Oswald Spengler, and he's asking, ask Thomas if he's familiar with the Archdruid John Michael Greer.
I know the man's name, but I don't, and I know of him, but I don't know anything about the gentleman. I don't know anything about him. Well, you see, Druidry is an interesting one. There's no Druids left. They were in the British Druids were all destroyed by the Romans in AD 60. The Irish Druids soldiered on until about 1610, as, after Christianity they became the Philid, were kind of like a secular Druids, and they remained in Irish culture until what was an event called the Flight of the Earls, and then they made their way to Europe with these sort of Irish royal families like the O'Neills and the O'Donnells, who made a deal with Queen Elizabeth to leave Ireland. So after Ireland had lost, Ireland was in an alliance with the Spanish and had lost the war that the Armada was in and so on, and they went to Europe and they vanished. According to, in my last book, The Druid Code, I cite Thomas Paine, who was the man who invented the United States. He came up with the term the United States of America. He was an English historian, philosopher, and a big Freemason in terms of Freemasonic history. He distinctly stated that the Druids of Ireland, Italy, and France went underground. I totally believe that. We look at things like the Culdees and these kinds of early Christian sects. They became Freemasons eventually in order to avoid persecution from the church. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, this gentleman that he mentioned, I don't know if he's involved in that element, but the thing is that calling yourself an archdruid or a druid, it's a kind of a loaded thing to do. Are you really an inheritant of the original tradition, or are you just some kind of leftover from some kind of 19th century aristocratic folly or game? I don't know. I'm not going to judge the person. I don't know them or anything like that. But having said that, I'm always dubious about people who put the terms archdruid or druid in front of their title, because it's like, well, do you go right back to the real druids, or is it just a kind of a new game or a club or something? So it's an interesting one. I'm not going to put anyone down or question them, but I don't know. I really don't know. My attitude is that the druids are probably gone. If they exist, they're probably elements of certain Freemasonic lodges in Ireland, Britain, and France, and Italy. The rest of us, fellas like myself, are involved in the study of druidry, and that's really it.
Thank you. Apparently he writes an online blog called the Archdruid Report. Who've written books on the Golden Dawn, Dark Fantasy, etc. Anyhow, so, yeah. And also people keep mentioning someone called Dynamo in the chat room here. Have you heard of this
A
fellow?
magician.
Yes.
Yeah, I see. This is a fascinating topic and something that people need to be aware of. Stage magic was created by people who could do real magic, so to avoid the English witchcraft laws. This is one of the things. A lot of these big-time stage magicians are actually doing real magic. I know that sounds bizarre, but it's true. Then they say, I'm just doing a trick. Now, that came out of the stop prosecution during the time. Remember, the English witchcraft laws existed until 1951, I think. It's not that long ago. You could still go to prison for being a witch or practicing witchcraft. So they invented stage magic. And let me tell you, stage magic is not that different from real magic. In fact, it is real magic, but it's just done in a different way. For example, I'll give you a classic example of a stage magician who did real magic. Now, a large part of magic and sorcery is a deception and invisibility. That doesn't mean literally turning invisible. It means hiding. It means it's almost like camouflage within reality. There was a famous British stage magician called Maskelyne that was a sensation back in the 1930s. When World War II broke out, he was recruited by the War Department to basically do magic on the Germans. He was the one who came up with the idea of creating inflatable tanks and inflatable trucks and scattering them all around England before D-Day, so aerial reconnaissance from German planes would think that the British and the American forces were mobilizing in, say, Dover for an attack on the north of France, when we all know they were going for Normandy. But one of his famous tricks in the war was he actually made the city of Alexandria in Egypt vanish and appear in another part of North Africa. What he did was he looked at the coastline of Alexandria at night and saw where the streetlights were, and a German bombing raid was expected. What he did was he told the people in Alexandria, and they'd switch the lights off in the city, and then he found a bay 20 miles down along the coast in Egypt that was of similar shape, and put lights inside, which is basically desert, along the coastline, so it would look like the outline and streetlights of Alexandria, and they bombed it. Now, people will say that's just deception, but it's still magic. It's still magic. Now, that's on the basic level. But you can take it to other levels. You're still affecting consciousness in accordance with will. You can take that to the next level. And I believe that I've no doubt that someone like, say, what's his name, David Copperfield, has an excellent understanding of sorcery. Yes, there are tricks. Yes, there are conjurations. Yes, there are all these kinds of things. But ultimately, real magic is also involved in these things. Now, this man, Dynamo, he does, you see, this is what's clever about it, and David Blaine as well. They do magic, but they also do things that are equally tricks and easily debunkable. You know what I'm saying? It's like a double cross kind of thing. It's almost like, it's like the millionaire who goes around in rags, and people say, oh, he has no money, but he has like $1 million on him in cash. It's that kind of thing. They're doing real magic and then saying it's just tricks. So, yeah, at this guy Dynamo, he's done things like, there's a famous one where he leans back on a TV show where he leans all the way back on his leg. Now, I know that can be done through it's a cantilever system that's inverted into the foot. And when they lean back, and people say, oh, they use video editing. But I've seen things that he's done that absolutely were real magic. Passing objects through other objects, like flicking a coin into a glass bottle. Now that's an ancient magic trick, with real a magic sorcery, I should say, that they can call a magic trick. So that's one of the great. When you go away tonight, and also they invoke entities to do things. They invoke entities. Now we'll talk about that later, what that actually means. Some people call them demons and so on, but they do that. Did you hear that?
Yeah, your cat's trying to tell you something.
That's a pussycat. Go to bed, you. But yeah, that's Benny the pussycat. But he didn't like when I said demons. But yes, reality is hackable. And these guys are doing it, and the reason why they called it stage magic was they wouldn't end up in prison under the English witchcraft laws. It's as simple as that.
Interesting. I saw a film a few years ago called The Prestige, which
a very good film. That I really liked that.
Yes, well, it had David Bowie in it as Nikola Tesla. I mean, you can't beat that.
Michael Caine actually introduces him to a magician, and he says, "No, this guy is not a trickster. This guy is doing real magic."
Yeah, and he was making sort of doppelgangers of himself. You know, he found some, and apparently this is a real thing that Nikola Tesla was actually. He had like some sort of portal that he would use that would create a new version of himself. But I don't exactly know what happened to him, but some people say that that's...
Well, I covered that in the book.
Did you?
Yeah, it's not Nikola... Well, it's not in terms of his case. Yeah, you can create a double of yourself. In the Irish tradition, it was called the fetch. F-E-T-C-H, a doppelganger. And this has actually happened to me. Not a double of me, but I've created a double of another person accidentally. You can... It's just one of these weird things. Now, in the Irish tradition, when you see a double of another person, it's usually that it's looked upon as an omen that this person has bad intention for you, and there's some truth to that. I'll tell you how it happened to me. I wrote about this in the book. I had a business relationship with somebody years ago in New York, and it went sour, and we were best friends before the thing happened. And basically we both ended up losing a lot of money. I blamed him, he blamed me, that kind of thing. Even though it was just bad luck, like the way egos get into it. A few years later, I'm walking through the streets in Dublin, and I'm thinking about, the colossal amount of money I lost with this guy. And at the time, I was going around looking for jobs, corporate jobs, and I was saying I would have been set for life if I hadn't, lost all that money. And, and I was full of kind of resentment. I was built full, this kind of thing. I was saying, shit. And there in the corner of my eye, walking down the street in Dublin, was the guy I was just thinking about. Walking about 50 feet in front of me, and walked right past me and went behind me, and I didn't dare make eye contact or look. And I knew right away that I generated his form through my extreme concentration in the moment, and that was the universe saying to me, just let it go. Just forget about it. And sure enough, about a year later, he calls me up out of the blue, and he says, it's a shame. We were, really good friends, and it fell apart, and, let's be mates again, that kind of thing. And I says, you're right, it's not, we both fucked up. Sorry, my language. We both messed up, and that was nice. And then he said to me, he said to me, about a year ago, I had the most weirdest dream about you. I was walking down the street and I saw you.
In a dream? Oh, wow, that's...
And it was the same time that I saw him walking down the street. So
you
that
saw
shows
his dream
you how...
body.
I probably created it in my extreme concentration. In his dream state, he was there, and the combined concentration of both of us created a doppelganger, and it just was one of these things that proves to you and proves to many people that reality is optional.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect example of reality hacking. And as you said, it's about focus and intent.
Yeah, absolutely. Extreme concentration. To be able to concentrate absolutely and create a pure stream of energy is a very difficult thing. But my God, the power that has. The power that has, because what you're doing, you're firing a laser beam through the subatomic field in front of you and getting what you want. And this is why we have intense rituals, shamanic drumming, intense chanting, this kind of idea. What we're building up a pure stream of energy to focus our will towards a trajectory. And we all do this all through our life. I mean, we've all had, I'm sure the people listening to the show tonight have all experienced things like this. One would be you were having a row with your girlfriend, and you were very angry, and something like a picture flew off a wall, a glass shattered, a glass table smashed up. I saw that once. So it wasn't me; it was somebody else who was pissed off. And suddenly, oh Jesus Christ, what was that? What the hell was that? The extreme intensity. That's called catalytic exteriorization phenomena. It was discovered by Carl Jung during a row he had with Sigmund Freud, where a bookshelf basically almost jumped on Freud. Very interesting, because I've had experience with bookshelves too. It's almost like the combined will of all my reading and all my concentration has been poured into a bookshelf, and the books on the shelf, that they become almost like a battery of psychic energy. And that's it. And also glasses. When you think of a glass too, or a drinking cup, and you've drunk from that glass during times of sadness or joy, being in love, being heartbroken, you poured your psychic energy into the actual, the layers of crystals within that glass or a ceramic mug. So it's not surprising that they shatter when you have an extreme moment of elevated psychic energy, And this is, we have to start looking around. This is the purpose of this book I've written, is to start looking around your life and your environment and not seeing things as ordinary anymore. See them the way the people of the proto-shamanic world, the megaliths, saw stones, as living things containing memories, containing energy forces, batteries, and calling upon them rather than accidentally discovering them as they happen.
I've just remembered what it was that I was thinking about. I was going to bring up when I got distracted, and it was about it was kind of the opposite of what we're talking about. In fact, it's about self-doubt being the thing that destroys magic. In fact, it seems that any kind of doubt, whether you doubt yourself or somebody else doubts it, it does have a kind of, they call people, a wet blanket. It does have that. Yeah. It puts a fire out. It draws the oxygen away, starves the idea.
That's a beautiful way of putting it, drawing the oxygen away. Or even blaming your problems on someone else. That's another one. Like instead of getting your own shit together, blaming it on someone else. That's a surefire way of, like when I wrote the book Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, it was a huge hit. The book became very successful. And I was suddenly in a world of people who basically did not want to, even though they may have been affected by a psychopath, in many cases not, they wanted to, rather than work on themselves, spend the rest of their lives in all eternity blaming everything on this other person. And even though I'd written in both my books, Puzzling People and Defeated Demons, the purpose is to accept this problem and move on. They wouldn't. They were in a pathological codependency with that individual to the point where they could not move on, and they became comfortable with it. And you can watch these people in real time actually dying. This is like, if people are listening to this tonight, if you have someone that you feel screwed you over in your life, forget about them. Because if you keep concentrating on them and ruminating over them, they will eat, these sensations will eat you alive. This is what, I've seen these ideas, like I said, the self-hexing, that's a great way of putting it. Self-hexing, this idea that, now things are screwed and I have to be screwed with them. It's often unnecessary. I mean, I always remember my grandfather, when he retired, he literally died within days because he believed, he subconsciously believed his life was over. And he looked like at 65, he looked like an old guy. At 67, 66, he looked like a corpse because he believed that it was over. It's true what they say, retirement is for quitters. And then you meet people who are 75, 80, and they look fantastic because they haven't self-hexed themselves into this belief that life is now over. And this is an issue that's definitely magical in terms of, like you said, how you approach it. Self-defeat is a curse against yourself.
Absolutely. And yes, it causes degradation of your physical being, and
Absolutely.
of your emotional being, and it, you know, because, I mean, people talk about it. Don't give your power away. What is your power? That's your soul that is here to do something and to share something. Oh yeah, there we go. I can hear crackling coming off your thing. And you know, being able to move forward without guilt or blame, which are other aspects. You know, I think guilt is really it's self what is it? No, the opposite of self-belief, self hatred, because
denial.
somebody. That's the word, denial. Yeah, it's just gone out of my head. Denial that somebody else has imposed on you. And that's why you get angry, and you get angry with them, and therefore you're giving your power away by, as you're saying, you know, focusing on somebody else as the source of that. So yeah, guilt is one of the biggest destroyers of your self-magic.
Yeah. I mean, guilt is a weird one too. It's an interesting one. Okay, we all have things we regret in our lives. There's two ways of doing this. The optimal way is to actually go up to the people you've hurt and say, listen, I'm sorry. Sometimes it's not possible. They could be dead, or they could be in another part of the world or something. Well, if you can't do that, try and make it up to someone in some other kind of way. The guilt is almost like a fear of accepting responsibility for a situation in some ways. And it'll eat you alive. Again, like you said, the battery is depleted, the fire goes out. You know, guilt is a weird one. I think a lot of people feel guilt over things that they shouldn't feel guilty about. They can't change them. It's almost like, in some levels, our society is geared towards making people feel guilty. You see things like the Me Too thing. You have all these kind of like progressive liberals. Oh, I'm guilty about being white. I'm guilty about being Western. I'm guilty about being a man. It's like, well, why don't you kill yourself? You know, because none of these things you had any say in. You couldn't, you didn't have any say in what country, race, culture where you were born in. So why are you feeling guilty for it? You know, this kind of thing. And that's also a depletion. And if you look at these kinds of like liberals who are completely like, oh, I'm guilty about being a Western white man, they look like a corpse that someone took a hairdryer to. They bald early, they fall apart, they go insane. It's because they're attacking their own psychic energy. There's nothing you can do about that. You only feel guilty for what you personally have done. You make amends. But in terms of like a collective guilt, collective shame, well, that's up to you. That's an individual choice. That's not something that the universe is demanding from you.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I thought I would drop this track in by world famous magician Jimmy Page and the Led Zeppelin team. Nobody's fault but mine. How about that?
Cool.
Of that track. And again, it ties back into your book, which I was looking at earlier, and it's about the use of the magical silence. That track, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Thomas, but because we had to drop, we were messing with the call before, but it's got these stops in it. The music and everything stops dead and then comes back at a seemingly random moment, but it's in the rhythm. Talk us through the magical use of the pause, the silence. I know you cover it in your book. Yeah,
well, you look at a painting or a drawing or a piece of architecture. It's made up of positive and negative spaces. If you didn't have the negative spaces, you wouldn't have the shapes surrounding it. You know, you draw an outline of something. It's only relevant because you're aware of its spatial difference between that and nothing, the demarcation line. So you draw an X. You know it's an X because of the way the negative space wraps around the X itself. You know it's a zero because of the way the negative space around the zero and in the center of the zero demarcates the actual zero. Audio works the same way. You try to imagine Beethoven's Fifth without these negative spaces. You know, it's those punctuations that are caused by the negative spaces between the that do that to you. What happens is it creates a parentheses within your consciousness where you develop a sense of anticipation before the next event. It's the same reason why you take, like on the show, I was on a show with you here a few years ago talking about my book Valpurgis Night, which deals with magic also, in the context of the Third Reich. Hitler was known for taking long pauses in between speeches. This is to build up the charge, so it can be released. The charge would have been things like anticipation, hyper vigilance, and these are the kind of neurochemicals would build up. And it works just like, I'm not familiar with, I don't know anything really about Led Zeppelin, but I was listening to that song, and yeah, I noticed those, the thing I did notice was those sudden gaps where, John Bonham hit the muted symbol, and then you have the silence before it takes off again. It's the same thing. It's what happens is, in that space, there's almost like a transformative moment where you're thrown into another reality. A flashing light, it's like a strobe that does that as well. You're thrown into an altered reality, and then you're blasted back into it again. And it's that sensation of the trough and then peak again that energizes you and releases the charge.
In a more banal use of that, now what was that? Oh God, I've forgotten the name of that quiz show. Where they first started doing this. It's the one where he says, can I call a friend? And I can't remember. Do you remember the name of that quiz show? Anyway, Chris Tarrant,
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yes. And this was the first show where that pause, between where he would, ask a question and the guy would reply. And, those pauses must have felt like infinity, like eternity to the person in the chair, because. And
they also told people to answer the question when they were ready. There was no clock.
Yes.
So they knew quite well that no one could resist doing it because the charge was released. I'll give you another example that happened even before. I remember like News at 10 in England on ITN with Trevor MacDonald. You'd have the chimes of Big Ben. Boom! A war started in the Middle East and it's all screwed. Boom, inflation is up 20%. Boom, Prime Minister says we're going to have lose 5,000 jobs in the coal board. Boom, the same kind of thing.
Indeed.
Building charge up. Yep.
Increasing the charge. So yes, time, charge, magic.
But sucking it out of you, but robbing your psychic energy to build up their charge.
Absolutely, and you can imagine because. Psychic energy works across time and space. So even if you're watching a repeat on Dave or something, that energy that you're sitting there watching, you're giving your power away, anticipating, waiting for the person to, is he going to go to hell or is he going to go to heaven? Has he got the question right? Is he going to be a millionaire? It's all about the use of time to build charge. So yes, that's a very, very important thing.
When they used to have public executions, it wasn't the energy of the person being murdered that was being harvested, it was the crowd watching them.
Interesting. Do you want to say more about that?
Yep. That's what was being harvested.
So, harvesting brings us to the energy of what we call demons or jinns or magicians. What do they call them? Magicians, familiars.
Familiars is what the witches would use. Yeah, the interdimensional refugees, as I call them.
All right.
They do exist. They are real. What they are, I don't know. I really don't know. I made a video about it on my open source occult TV channel last year, and it's up to 350,000 views already. Is it us? Is it an aspect of us? Like, remember, the word demon comes from, or daemon, comes from the Greek word meaning genius, and a flash of genius. Now, why do magicians summon demons? Why have the cunning men summon demons? Well, it's quite simple. This consciousness force. You can call it a demon, you can call it a fairy, you can call it a jinn, you can call it anything you want. It's not subject to the same space-time realities that we are. Therefore, it's very useful, if you can get one, to give you information about the past or things that are missing. And this is why they did it. Now, this is also a dangerous game to play with. If you want to summon an entity, and it's actually a lot easier than you think it is. This entity, like for instance, my book, I'll give you an example. My book, The Invocation of Sorcery, it's a magical book in how it's written. It begins with the human subconscious mind, the depths of the ocean, Cthulhu. I draw examples on Cthulhu. I draw examples on the Loch Ness Monster. I bring Crowley into that because of the Abramelin, the mage ritual that was performed at the Loch Ness. I then take it from that into the world of fire. So in the generation of fire and the generation of symbols and logos. So the book is very deliberately written as a ritual. So if you read that book from beginning to end, you've taken part in a magical ritual. Now, I didn't hide that from the reader. And I said, do not be surprised if certain spiritual activity takes place during the course of you reading this book. Now, this has been, since it's been published, and it's only been a few weeks out, I've been bombarded with private messages and emails saying paintings are jumping off the walls. I'm having unbelievable synchronicities. My dreams are off the scale. Well, that's because the book is not only a book about magic, it's also a magic book. It's not done for me to affect the consciousness of other people. It's done for the people to affect their own consciousness by taking them on a journey. I'm taking them on a shamanic journey with this book. I am the shaman. This is the book is the drum beat and the incantation. And I'm taking them into the spirit world. That's my intention, but I'm not leaving them there. I'm not forcing them there. They can go there themselves. I distinctly said in the book, just as in other magic books I've read myself, like the Grimoire of Saint Cyprian, and there's many other books, that things will happen. Because when you read these books and when you get into these magical states, and it's nothing to be frightened about, you will alert certain forces and make them interested in you. 999 times out of 1,000, there's no harm in this. They're just curious. Things will drop off walls. Books will fall off bookcases. And in my case, an entire bookcase basically attacked me. My house literally cracked in two when I was writing this book, and that's not a joke. That's for serious. I won't go into too deep, but basically, I went through hell writing this book, and it was because I had to summon these forces, both inside my own consciousness and through external consciousness, to convey the message in such a way that it would be understandable to the ordinary person. Because I think I was doing something that has not been done since the days of chaos magic, where I was bringing the magical forces and the dynamics of the consciousness in terms of its relationship with the universe into the hands of the ordinary person. So it was going to attract a lot of the, shall we say, spiritual investigation from the outside towards me. Many things over the years I've summoned these things both directly and indirectly. They do exist. What they are, I don't know if they come from us. I'm not completely sure, but they are there for a reason. When I was extremely ill about 10 years ago, I accidentally summoned an Egyptian god, Sobek, while I was in hospital. I thought this was the most bizarre thing in the world until I discovered that many people who suffered physical injuries and went through a lot of pain had seen this god as well, particularly in childhood, and had childhood operations. So that was an archetype that became prevalent within the course of my own magical discovery. And we have to live with this reality. Now, it's not terrifying unless you become terrified of it. when, I'm not telling people to do these things, and in fact they shouldn't, but if you summon an entity and bring it forth, you have to treat it like it's absolute garbage. And I'll tell you why. If you don't impose your will upon it and your force upon it, by treating it like shit, by treating it like rubbish, and imprisoning it, it will see any kind of compassion towards it from you, because remember, it's not a human being, it's not an animal, as a sign of weakness, and it'll then immediately impose itself upon you. And this is why I tell people to stay away from grimoires and summoning demons and entities, because most people are too nice to involve themselves in this stuff. When Crowley and Victor Newberg summoned Choronzon 333, or Choronzon, in the desert in Algeria, they were, Newberg, the tortured poet, was handed a dagger in order to kill himself before the demon would possess his soul. This is what you're up against. Or else he would be locked at the 10th Aether of the abyss for all eternity. So this is why the elites are obsessed with summoning demons through grimoires and stuff like that. Most of us in our lives have encountered demons accidentally. We probably put them down as paranormal experiences, shadow people, grey aliens. The most common form of seeing a demon is a UFO. I know that's going to be very unpopular with people who believe in alien visitation, but that's what you're seeing. You're seeing an interdimensional being in the sky as a flying saucer, or whatever a cigar-shaped thing, whatever you see it as. That's what it is. That's what Mothman was. That's what all those things are. They're directly connected to human consciousness. They are alive, and they are very interested in us, and they are portals to allow us to examine, experience, understand, and take advantage of fluctuations in space-time reality. Now, back to Mothman. That's a classic one. Mothman appeared in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on the Ohio River. I think it was in 1964, in the weeks leading up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge across the town on Christmas Eve that led to the deaths of many people. Now, the psychic energy of this horrific accident in a small town caused by the collapse of this bridge had been fired back in time into the past, so people would pick it up and resonate this local tragedy in terms of this gigantic Mothman creature flying around the town. I'm going to be doing this is another thing you really need to learn about sorcery and magic, that you get echoes from the future coming back, future disasters coming back that allow you to prepare for them. I'm going to be doing the AB9 event in England in the beginning of May, and I'll be talking about this in terms of the 9/11 experience. All these indicators and blowbacks and foreshadowing of the 9/11 event appeared in people's consciousness, from everything from album covers to storylines of TV shows before the event, because it's like dropping a pebble in the river, in this pond. The ripples go in all directions, into the future and into the past, and sensitive people, i.e. artists in particular, are capable of picking up these echoes before the event happens. And that's why they summon demons, as a method of understanding what's happening in the future or the past in order to give them an advantage. And that's why the elites, and as countless Dennis Wheatley novels have told us, are obsessed with summoning demons.
That's fascinating. And, okay, so there's a couple of subjects. But in there, the idea, I've always felt, whenever I've had what people call a déjà vu, the event that I'm foreseeing, and it's usually in a dream that I don't remember at the time, but I remember when the moment happens, it's not, I don't feel like it's a personal thing. I feel it's like you're saying, that the large event drops a stone in the ripple of the river, in the river of time and space, and those memories of what you were doing at the time ripple back into your dreams. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that, but I also think that we live in different reality multiverses at the same time. I think there's loads of JPs, there's loads of Thomas Sheridans were existing like different tracks on a record playing at the same time. Anthony Peake has done some great work on this. Yeah, I think if you die in one reality, you continue in another, and so on. And I think momentarily you have a glitch in the tracks where you actually feel the reality or sensations of the echo of what happened to you in another track. I think that has a lot to do with it. Another thing about deja vu that's interesting is they're not, you kind of lose them as you age. I used to have them constantly when I was a teenager and in my 20s, and then they started fading away in my 30s, and now I don't really have them at all anymore.
Really, that's interesting. Because, I was discussing with Becky earlier, or yesterday, that I had one the other day of just us having dinner, just a regular thing. The Becky had to, so she's having a deja vu of a deja vu of a deja vu. Is that right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
3 levels, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's where you're attenuated with the kind of your own consciousness in terms of its relationship to the cosmos. For me, dreams are what does it for me. I mean, I have dreams that they're just unbelievable, and I constantly see the future in them. I think each of us has an individual talent in these things. Some people will have remarkable ability. You see, this is why magic is called an art and a science. It's a science in that the specific processes are used to hack the universe, but it's called an art in that some people are more talented in one field than another. So just like you could have someone who's a fantastic guitar player and a crap drummer, you'll have people who excel in deja vu, but their dreams are not so intense, or someone whose their dreams are phenomenal and they don't have deja vu. I mean, that's me. I mean, my dreams are, I actually love going to sleep just because I have a whole other reality that I've cultivated and worked upon in dream world for the last, 10, 20 years, 10, 15 years. And it's just, that's my, extra normal activity is in the dream world. And I mean, I constantly have dreams of people who I'm friends with or I know, and I meet them and encounter them in the dream world. And they tell me they dreamed about me at the same time. So that's another reality as well. Also, appearing in someone else's dreams constantly is also a kind of an indicator of your growing proficiency in magical, in the magical path and in the pursuit of sorcery, because what you're developing is your charisma. Now, charisma is nothing to do with Hollywood and stuff. Well, it is a bit, but charisma is a Greek word, a Greek term that means to have the grace of the gods. And the more you embark upon a magical existence, the more you develop your charisma. The greater your charisma, the more likely you are to attain notoriety, fame, but more importantly, appear in the dreams of other people. And that's one, I'm sure you have it because you've got a radio show and stuff and your voice is on the air, and you'll have people, I have a dream about you last night. I have constantly people emailing me, telling me to have dreams about me. That's the charisma. You're attenuating your own psychic energy at a different level beyond the sort of the normal necessity for a 5-sense engagement, to the point where you're actually operating outside space-time and entering into people's dreams.
Hi, Strangeness, with Thomas Sheridan here on Wolf Spirit Radio. So, yes, appearing in dreams, finding, getting to the, so here's another question I might have, that I've often had, and I haven't answered it myself, but in a dream, what's your name and what do you look like? Are you ever able to look in a mirror or anything like that?
Well, I'll tell you about it. No, I'm not. Am I able to look in the mirror? No, but I know it's me because of the sensations I feel are exactly the same ones as I feel in my waking life. But I will tell you about a recurring dream I've had for several years. I'll go back probably to the 90s. And in the dream, I'm at the corner of a street, and it always appears in this dream in the same house, is a 3-story American-type colonial house, quite pretty. When I go into the house, on the first floor, the ground level floor, it's filled with all kinds of archives of, like a library. It's like a library of documents and images and photographs. And I feel very safe and secure there. I was frightened to go. I wasn't frightened. I would say the word was intimidated by the second floor for years. And I would go into this go into the house, walk in the front door, very comfortable and happy on the ground floor. And the second floor, I would move up to it. It took me a long time to go, and the second floor was filled with treasures, things that I loved, things that I wanted, things that I desired on the second floor, but a sense of unease that I shouldn't be here, or someone's going to capture me, or something's going to happen. And then there's a third floor, and this is the most bizarre thing of all. The third floor is absolutely terrifying. Now, when I say terrifying, I don't mean like the horror that you experience when watching a horror film, or shock or fright or anything like that. The kind of like fight or flight kind of chemical fear. It is the gates of hell. It's like I feel a terror inside me that I can't even describe. It's beyond fear, it's beyond trepidation, it's beyond terror. It is literally something on that third floor that wants to eat my living energy alive and suck it out of me. But yet, at the same time, I'm beckoned to go to that third floor, to go up there, because something I need badly in terms of my own will, my own desires, is on that third floor. And even to look at the staircase leading up to that third floor, I start shaking in terror in the dream. I start feeling my energy depleting. I get a sense of terror that I'm looking into the eyes of the devil, or if the devil existed, or something like that. The ultimate manifestation of pure terror and evil. It's almost like a saturation of complete evil. And I don't know what that dream is about. I mean, I know this is kind of personal, I'm talking about it in front of lots of people, but that's how it feels to me. It's levels of my consciousness. I know that for sure. Now, in Jungian analysis, the subconscious mind is the basement. And so lots of people generally have a fear of going into the basement. This dream indicates to me that I have dealt with the basement part. I'm comfortable with my subconscious mind. And what the 3 steps are through this building are elevation towards godhood. Now, I don't mean that to sound narcissistic, but basically your purpose as a human being on this earth is to become a kind of a living God. To transcend the mundane and the ordinary in order to elevate towards the extraordinary. And the first floor of Concord, and that's why it's full of archives and things like that. It's almost like a validation that, like, I've got this, you're okay. Go to the second floor. The second floor is full of desires and things I want, but they're all materialistic. And at the same time, too, it's not enough. And it doesn't feel secure. But I know the ultimate security is on the third floor. Now, but then again, like I said to you, it's almost like it's entering, and have to walk through the gates of hell. in order to get to the third floor. I don't know what this dream is about in terms of that. I don't know why it appears in a 3-story house at a corner. All I know is that I have cultivated this dream to such a point where I can enter this house on the street in will when I go to sleep. And that, to me, is a validation that I'm in another reality. When you go asleep and you have dreams, you're not having an imagination journey. You're actually there in this other world. But in this other world, your experiences are like that of a spirit rather than a physical being. But you're still there. That's another reality. That's another dimension, another realm. That is the realm of the gods. And like the Greek stories tell us, the Nordic and the Celtic and the Irish stories of mythology, they tell us the same things, that there's trials, that the spirit world is a series of trials. You have Odin going down into the bottom of the Yggdrasil tree to the Mirmir's well in order to sacrifice his eye. You have endless stories like that. You have Arjuna at the Battle of Puruvishta in the Bhagavad Gita, has to kill himself and his family in order to attain spiritual things. You have Orpheus in the underworld. Endless ideas of sacrifice. But they're real. They're real. It's almost like we have a subconscious mind and a superconscious mind. And that superconscious mind is one that talks to us in different, where subconscious mind talks to us in symbols and allegories. The superconscious mind talks to us in trials and tribulations that echo our experiences in this real world now. And I find that incredibly fascinating. And that's why I'm very interested in magic and sorcery, because it's the method of actually trying to bring that superconsciousness and subconscious world into this reality now.
That's fascinating. Talking of, you were talking about the path to godhood, which is also, they call the path of initiation. And it seems, the first, second, third initiation, each of which is not like, oh, you just go around and people do a ceremony and boom, blah, blah. It's a terrifying situation because you basically have to break through your consciousness that limits you from being, from allowing your own higher spirit to come in. And it is a terrifying thing. It always has to be, because it has to kind of break you apart in some strange way. You can't.
Oh, you have to be torn to bits. Yeah, you literally have to be torn to pieces in order to get what you want. This is why, the cosmos does not reward people who blame others for their problems or join political parties or hate, this kind of thing, hate others or hate other groups. They'll always be destroyed. You've got to kind of sacrifice yourself on the sacrificial fires of your own ego and consciousness. I discovered that when I used to be a stand-up comedian. Walking up in front of a pub full of 500 drunk Irish people, you'll and tell them jokes. You'll know if you're shit or not. And the power that I used to get, the while that I did that, the power that I achieved from that was astounding. And it was because I was willing to. It was almost like a battle. We can't go with the gladiators in the Colosseum anymore, but we can actually challenge ourselves. Like you do that when you put yourself up on the radio. I'm doing that right now when I put myself on the radio. You will often find the people who snap at us and snipe and take pot shots at us have never done any of these things. They've never stood in front of a crowd on their own on the stage or in anywhere in life and had to defend themselves. And therefore they resent those of us who do. Those of us who stand up and say, hold on, I'm here, I'm ready to take the shit. Let's go for it. And it's a very interesting thing. And it was a protection thing. It's almost like you saying to the universe, I will not be a sucker, I will not be damaged, I will not be fucked over, pardon my French, screwed over by you. And gifts will come. Rewards will come. Wonderful people will come. Beautiful people will arrive. Why? you actually stood your ground and you announced to the world, I'm willing to be destroyed in order to prove that I have value. That's an incredibly magical thing, powerful, unbelievable thing, because you'll still get respect. You'll still get that, and it's like the ones who don't do that are the ones who spend their lives blaming others for their own failures.
And that's the whole. What is it? I'm terrible with remembering old phrases. It's like providence. Is it providence favors the bold? You know, if you do something that is completely unexpected, or just like it's very, you don't see an apparent reward from it, that you will, the universe will shower its favors on you because you've actually gone against the fears of being a human, and you step into the world of the superhuman.
Well, you look at a great one is seafaring. I mean, I was reading there about the great Portuguese era of discovery, where these guys left Portugal and shitty. You see the ships they left in? They were crap. They were like hardly any bigger than rowing boats, and yet they navigated the earth and discovered the globe. You have the Vikings who left Norway and made their way to North America in these basically rowing boats. And then other things you had, like in the Pacific, you had the Maoris who made it to Easter Island from like Hawaii. These are vast distances. Now, that's by any standard superhuman. They took, like, you think of the magical device, the wand or whatever was the boat. It captured the wind or the sails or the tides to do what it did, but yet it achieved colossal things. And when you see these ships that they sailed around, or these long ships or ships that they sailed around the world, they're incredibly small. And you say, how the hell did that thing navigate the globe? And it did. It did because of the will of the person behind it. This is the thing. You said fortune favors the bold. This idea of providence. There's so much truth to that. Again, with the idea of, like, I don't believe necessarily that these people are lucky. Of course they were geniuses. Of course they were clever. But it was that hurling of themselves into the abyss that generated the rewards. This ability to say, screw it, I'm going to try this. Everyone laughed at them. The people said it's impossible. You're going to die out there. And then they come back and say, where are you? Well, I discovered the earth. And this is literally what happened, back in the times of the Renaissance, that these people had incredible, and then again also with the Vikings and so on, that they discovered the world through these. Like, here's a classic example. The first humans in North America were the Clovis people. Do you know where the Clovis people came from? France. You know how they got to the Americas? In canoes. And then you tell me that human beings are ordinary or incapable of, not you, but like in general, incapable of incredible things, incapable of anything. Frenchmen, ancient French people, got to America on canoes. And that alone is mind-blowing. If human beings can do that, and then, but this is an allegory of the magic as well. How many people know about Clovis people getting to the United States on canoes? Almost nobody. How many people know about Columbus getting to America on 3 ships when he already knew the way, had the navigation charts and so on? Everybody. We're back to the folk magic again. The Clovis people who got to America on canoes were folk magicians. The Columbus and the Freemasons who traveled over the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria were pathological, aristocratic magicians. And that's the power of folk magic versus the elite's magic.
There you go. So, coming back to folk magic, people magic. We're all magicians, really.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been the job of the church to convince all of humanity that they can't. The average man and woman in the street is just like how you described a demon, really.
A piece of meat.
A piece of meat. It's a meat column. You got some great words there. That has no inherent power or soul or anything. It's the only that the church would do that. And it seems this is the moment when we're all starting to kind of regain this our facilities again. The energy of manifestation, as we call it these days, is becoming much more powerful. And I remember reading about manifestation in the early 2000s, and things would take several months to manifest when I would think about them and focus on things. And now they're coming almost like the next day or later that day. And that's what you were saying before, that these energies are returning to us.
Energy is extremely abundant right now. It's as simple as that. There's vast amounts of energy there for anyone who wants to take it. And that's what it is. It's compared to when we were kids, it was a lot more difficult to procure and direct it. Now it's everywhere, and people are missing out on it. They're not taking advantage of it. And this is why the control grid is cracking down further on people. They're cracking down. They're telling people they're useless, they're no good, they have to be replaced. Transhumanism is coming in. Robots are coming in. People join cults waiting for the alien spacemen to arrive to give them salvation. That's another version of Christianity, by the way. They can't do anything without bureaucracy. You see, this is the thing. There's a total and utter lockdown, control, demarcation, limiting of people's consciousness, because the elites are only the elites because not enough of us here, ordinary people, have figured out that, like you said, we're all magicians, and that's what they're really terrified of.
They are, and people listening. I mean, there is a magic in doing what I'm doing. If you're doing a theatre play, they call it stagecraft.
Yeah.
Because the illusion is when you're watching a play, you suspend disbelief. And very much, you're listening to a radio show. Obviously, we can hear your voice, is over a telephone at this moment, but earlier on, when you use Skype, it sounds like they're two people sitting in the same room, in the same location. But through the magic of internet craft, we're able to create a virtual conversation. They call it virtual, but it's still craft, isn't it, Thomas?
Yeah, an example I give in the book is radio signals. Now a kind of a time travel is when radio signals are sent off into space, and then someone is tuning in an FM radio or an AM radio years later, and then a signal that was broadcast in the 1940s or 30s arrives on their radio because it's bounced off some object in outer space and come back. That's a type of time travel when you think about it.
There was a film called Frequency. Did you see that one?
Yeah, no, it's a very common thing, very common. In fact, in the book, I covered an experience that I had when I was 14, I think, and I started getting into H.P. Lovecraft big time, and I got a book of his short stories. I think it was a Corgi book. Don't quote me on that. And I was under my bed every night reading that book with a little flashlight, a little kind of flashlight, like, those B batteries that they had, B-cell batteries they had when we were kids, like Ever-Ready, in this little silver flashlight, deeply reading these H.P. Lovecraft stories. At the same time, I had this little red Philips plastic transistor radio with those little white earpieces that you put in your ear. They were like those mono, and you put them in your ear when you listen to your little transistor radio when we were kids. And I'm tuning around listening to the static, and suddenly I hear Rhode Island's #1 Buick dealer, and then it faded out. And the signal had somehow crossed the Atlantic on the AM dial and got into an earpiece in the council flat I lived in Dublin into my ear. And this is not unusual either, because radio waves they can literally be blown by solar waves all around the planet. So you could have a radio station that was broadcasting on one side of the planet, someone could hear it on the other. A freak thing happens every so often. But it happened to be Rhode Island and Providence, which is where Lovecraft came from. It was almost like I had used, through my sheer will, in the dark, in a classic ritual sense, in complete darkness, reading these H.P. Lovecraft stories with this flashlight under the blankets, absolute focus, and then listening to the radio, pulled this radio signal across the Atlantic from Rhode Island, where Lovecraft came from. And then you think of the radio antenna, the aerial, as a wand, this kind of idea, which has actually been central to so much of my work and things like megaliths and so on, round towers. It shows you that life, it showed me at a very early age, that life is not ordinary, and that literature, art, music, everything is part of the magical process. And the extreme concentration. I can even remember the story I was reading was The Haunter in the Dark, which was about a church at the top of Federal Hill in Providence, Rhode Island, where these entities lived in the basement of the church. We're back to that thing again. It's the human imagination is more than, and the human will and focus is much more than some kind of flight of fancy. It's a powerful weapon. And we're constantly, for centuries, millennia now, been forced to believe that it means nothing. The dreamers and the someone who's a fantasist, someone who's off with the fairies, this kind of thing. That's because they don't want ordinary people understanding the power of pure concentration.
And indeed, it just comes to mind that we are radioactive. We are active on the radio, emitting our energy. As your soul is working through your body. Your higher self is broadcasting its purpose through your voice, encoded in your words, encoded in the frequencies of the voice. And there we are. And again, we're having a virtual conversation in this radioactive environment. Everything that you do, every split mental atom of yours is splitting atoms in other people's minds in a quantumly connected way, as you were putting on your page earlier on. So this is how we're all going to be. I believe it's one day we won't need radios to do this. It's just our presence, and the more presence that you have, the more radioactive you become.
Yeah, that's true. We're only limited by limitations that have been imposed upon us. It's a weird one. It's you look at ancient mythology, ancient spirituality, they all come up with the same idea that human beings are far more powerful than what they currently are. That's a common thing, a common mythological motif. Is that, and there's so many stories of the ordinary boy who does this in folklore and mythology, or the ordinary man who achieves amazing things. These are all allegories of these forces within us, these magical forces. And when you say magical, people think, oh, it's all... No, it's not that. These are natural forces. It's just that we haven't capitalized upon them completely. We get fleeting glimpses of them during moments of extreme concentration. A classic one being the idea of a mother lifting a 2-ton SUV off her child after an accident. How did she get that energy? Well, she hacked reality. She invoked magic, and these kinds of things. Or extreme things like you like that story I told with the doppelganger. My friend in New York that I saw his double one day walking down the street in Dublin. Other things, a relationship with someone, and it's not working out, or something like that, and you can sense it, or they're thinking about other things or other people. You can feel it, or when they're completely enraptured within you, caught within you, you feel that as well. These are extra normal perceptions. They're beyond, what we're told everyday life is. The deep relationship someone can have with a pet or a child, or their garden, the flowers in their garden. It's, these are the glimpses of the power beyond the mundane, beyond the reality. And that's really what this book was about. I wanted to take people and actually supercharge them. I know that sounds kind of a bit narcissistic and a bit ambitious, but if you read that book from beginning to end, you'll come out the other end a different person. That book was very specifically written in that way to actually guide you. That's why it begins with the subconscious mind, the depths of the ocean, the depths of lakes. It was to pull the person reading the book from the depths of their subconscious and guide them on a journey towards the end to understand the realities of this world in terms of they're not mundane, they're not average, and they don't need to be limited. Although giving them a story along the way about various subjects and topics, it builds to a crescendo to the point where after a while the book is like does its job, and then they're ready to go off and take it themselves and write their own book. And that's what I would love people to do, is to start writing their own book of magic about themselves from tonight listening to this show. Start keeping a dream diary. Start noticing things that are unusual. Start trying to affect reality around you. And this is what will transform you from being a victim into a proactive player in this reality.
Indeed, radioactive, split the atoms.
Radioactive, yeah.
So, hey, listen, we got about 10 minutes out, and I want to just kind of shift gears a bit. Now, I can't remember, and I'm pretty sure, did you post something about a tunnel under the Thames in London?
I did a while ago. The Woolwich Tunnel, I think it's called.
It's the Greenwich Tunnel. And I have to say, when I was a kid, I lived in East London. I grew up in East London. And
yeah, I remember you talking about that.
Yes. We were watching TV last night, and there's an advert, I can't remember what it's something like East London, innit? And there was a glimpse of that particular tunnel. I was saying to Becky, look, there it is, there's that tunnel. Do you want to tell this story of this time tunnel, as it were?
It's an amazing story. But it's almost, okay, all around the world, the stories of railway tunnels are kind of haunted. There's a famous one in Connecticut called the Hoosac Tunnel, where it runs through a mountains on its way between Boston and New York. And it's full of kind of like supernaturalism. There is these kinds of ideas of the tunnel going through it. They're all over the world. There's a famous, the Charles Dickens famous story, what was it called? The Signalman, about the tunnel where the accident happened. And he kept reliving the accident in his mind every time the signals went on inside the signal box. But that tunnel in London, I never knew about that. I didn't even know the tunnel existed until that article came along, and I posted it to my wall. It's that things would happen, like workmen, when the tunnel was being retiled or cleaned, they would walk from one end of the tunnel that would take, the walk would take 15 minutes. When they walked through it, a minute had passed on their watch, or half an hour. The time was not correct according to the distance it would take to walk through the tunnel. Now, London is a very magical city and a very powerful city anyway, and you have this river flowing over it. But what was amazing was that thread that I posted to Facebook that you commented on and other people, that all this kind of, it became a magical kind of experience in itself. One of my Facebook friends who comes from London, posted he loves The Who and the film Quadrophenia. The original poster from Quadrophenia was Jimmy standing in that tunnel. on this kind of thing. There was all kinds of interesting synchronicities that were happening around this tunnel. Why it's like that, I don't know, but I think it's to do with the river flowing over, water under the water, this kind of thing. The tunnel going sideways in perpendicular to the flow of the river, and so on. But yeah, that's an amazing story. That time has no meaning inside that tunnel.
I used to love going down that place. Because Greenwich was a really nice area, and Bethnal Green was a bit scruffy, and so it was always just like a hop and a skip and a blip under the river, and suddenly you're in this completely other place where time magic happens. Don't forget, it's also the Greenwich Meridian.
Yeah,
I wonder if that time that is exactly on the meridian. I've no idea.
Have you watched that TV show with Sean Bean called the Frankenstein Chronicles?
No.
It's very good. I think it's an ITV show, but it's on the internet if you look around. It all takes place around Greenwich, and it's around the time of Frankenstein and Mary Shelley, and he's investigating Galvanism and this disappearance of bodies that are appearing up on the river near Greenwich. And it really plays on this idea that Greenwich Mean Time, and London itself, that it's almost like the womb of supernaturalism. Very good TV show, actually. I
think you're right. I think that there is something magical about the Greenwich time, the Greenwich timeline. You can stand with your, feet on one side, and one foot is east, one foot is west, one foot is one time. There's something about it. There's something definitely very, very interesting about it. Thomas.
Well, magic and navigation has always been connected.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go. Because that's how it's an orientation. And, I don't know if you come from another planet, do you observe longitude and latitude? There's a whole other story about that, isn't there?
Well, to finish this off now, let's talk about what I spoke about at the beginning. The person rubbing two sticks together. You get the cross, and then you get the four cardinal points. You get the Celtic cross, north, south, east, west. You have from that rubbing of two sticks together, the idea of the sun wheel, the swastika, the Celtic cross develops within the consciousness, and it leads to navigation, the exploration of the planet. It all. I mean, that's even like what we spoke about in this show. You have actually turned it into a kind of conjuration at the end. I spoke about at the beginning about the rubbing of two sticks together, which is actually the root of the Celtic cross, which is also the root of things to do with navigation and the cardinal points, but also to do with psychology in terms of Jungianism. And then at the very end, for some reason, you bring in the Greenwich Mean Time thing. So even this show itself has been a magical journey.
Absolutely, because we like to take everybody beyond. That's what it's about. Thomas Sheridan, listen, publicize your book. Plug yourself as hard as you can right now.
My website is thomassheridanarts.com. I have another website called streetdruid.net. If you want to get into the magic stuff, my YouTube channel is Open Source Occult TV, and the book is called Sorcery: The Invocation of Strangeness. You'll see it on my Facebook page, or you'll see it on my website. And it's a follow of the previous book called The Druid Code, and the two of them go very well together. So if you want to have a navigation through the mysteries of the past, the mysteries of the future, and the mysteries of yourself, they're worth checking out. And they both got very good reviews, and I've had people saying things like the new book I've written, Sorcery, is like the book of the year and this kind of thing, which came out of nowhere. So it's obviously a book that people are enjoying.
Certainly, as far as I've seen tonight, and I'm definitely going to read it from beginning to end. So let's hope my house doesn't collapse or take off, which would be a real feat because it's made of stone. So Thomas Sheridan, it's been a real pleasure once again, and we'll be hearing more from Thomas once a month here regularly on Wolf Spirit Radio. I really look forward to that.
Yeah, and if you could find out the music for the Sky at Night, maybe we could use that for the show.
What a good idea. What a good idea. Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas. Here we go.
All the best, JP. Thank you.
You.
Always a pleasure talking to you.
And good luck with the book sales. I really think this is a hit.
Thank you very much.
Beyond, 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 beyond.